The unexpected challenge. Captain Daniel Hayes stood at the edge of the docking bay, looking out at the massive alien city stretching far into the horizon. The towering spires of the alien buildings shimmered in the twin suns of the distant planet. Daniel had seen many strange worlds in his career as a soldier, but nothing quite like this. The air felt thick with anticipation, and his pulse raced. He had been sent here on a mission that he could not refuse. The message had been clear: test humanity's strength, prove it worthy, or fail. A ship had arrived with a message from Princess Xelari, the ruler of the alien kingdom on this planet. She was known throughout the galaxy for her intelligence and power, but more than that, she was known for her pride. Princess Xelari believed that no race could compare to her own people. She believed that the alien species were the pinnacle of all life in the universe. That was until she heard about humanity. There were stories about humans, about their bravery, their resilience, their ability to survive impossible odds. And now, Princess Xelari wanted to test these stories. She wanted to see if the humans truly were as powerful and as unstoppable as the legends claimed. Daniel had been chosen to represent humanity. The soldiers around him spoke in hushed tones. Some were nervous, some were excited, but Daniel wasn't like them. He didn't feel fear. He felt determination. He had been trained for this moment. He was prepared to face whatever trial this princess had in mind. Nothing would break him. Nothing would stop him from proving humanity's strength. The message had been clear: prove your worth in battle. If you succeed, humanity will earn the respect of the entire galaxy. If you fail, your people will be nothing more than a footnote in history. Daniel's ship touched down, its engines roaring as it slowly settled on the surface of the alien world. The air felt different here, darker, heavier. It was a constant reminder that he wasn't on Earth anymore. This wasn't his home, and the rules here were different. But one thing was certain: he was not going to back down. As he walked through the docking bay, his boots clanging against the metal floors, he saw a group of alien soldiers waiting for him. Their eyes glowed in the dim light, their expressions unreadable. They were watching him closely, judging him. Daniel stood tall, his chest out, and made sure to meet their gaze. He wouldn't let them see him as weak. He couldn't afford to. One of the soldiers stepped forward. "The princess awaits you," the alien said in a voice that sent chills down Daniel's spine. There was something unnerving about the calmness in his tone, as if Daniel was nothing more than an interesting experiment, a test. They led him through a series of long, winding corridors. The walls were smooth, metallic, and cold to the touch. The air was silent except for the soft hum of machinery. Soon, they'd reached a large open chamber. In the center of the room was Princess Xelari, sitting upon a high throne. Her eyes were sharp, her features regal and commanding. She had the look of someone who had never known defeat, someone who had been at the top of the galaxy for far too long. "Captain Daniel Hayes," she said, her voice both sweet and dangerous. "I've heard much about your kind, your race, your strength." Her eyes glimmered with curiosity. "But I wonder, do you truly possess the power that your stories claim?" Daniel stood in front of her, standing tall, his gaze unwavering. He knew what this was: a challenge, a test. But he wasn't afraid. He'd faced impossible odds before, and he'd come out on top every time. "I'm here to prove humanity's strength," Daniel said, his voice steady. "If you have a challenge for me, I'll face it. And I'll win." Princess Xelari studied him for a long moment. She didn't seem impressed, but she didn't seem angry either. Instead, she smiled. It was a cold, calculating smile, one that sent a chill through Daniel's spine. "You think you can win?" she asked, her voice low. "You think your species is strong enough to stand against mine?" Daniel nodded. "I know we are." Xelari's eyes narrowed. "Then prove it." With a swift motion, she snapped her fingers. The ground beneath them shifted, and the floor opened up. From the shadows emerged a massive alien creature, towering over both Daniel and the princess. Its eyes glowed an eerie green, and its body was covered in scales that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. It roared, a sound that echoed through the chamber, shaking the walls. "This is your first trial," Zira said, her voice cold and indifferent. "Defeat this creature, and you will have proven that you are worthy. Fail, and you will become nothing more than another failed experiment." Daniel's heart raced, but his mind stayed calm. He'd faced threats like this before. Bigger, stronger, faster. But he knew how to win. He knew how to fight smart. And this time, he would win for humanity. He had to. The creature lunged at him, its massive jaws snapping shut. Daniel ducked, rolling to the side. He had no time to think, just react. He was in enemy territory, and he had to fight with everything he had. Princess Zira watched from her throne, her expression unreadable. The princess offer. The air in the grand hall was thick with tension. Captain Daniel Hayes stood before Princess Zira, his boots firm against the polished floor, and his posture straight as an arrow. The alien princess, sitting upon her high throne, watched him intently. Her cold, calculating eyes studied every movement he made, as though she were reading him like a book. It was a silent moment, one that seemed to stretch on forever. Daniel could feel his heart beating loudly in his chest, but he didn't let it show. He had been trained for moments like this, intense, high-pressure situations where one mistake could cost everything. The princess's presence was powerful, but Daniel had learned long ago not to back down when the stakes were high. Finally, Princess Zira spoke. Her voice echoed through the massive chamber, smooth and controlled, with an undertone of something darker, something dangerous. "Captain Daniel Hayes," she began, her tone full of mockery, "I have heard much about humanity. Your kind is known for its unrelenting determination, its will to fight, and its ability to overcome impossible odds. But I wonder, can you live up to the stories?" Daniel met her gaze, his jaw set. "I'm here to prove humanity's worth," he said, his voice calm but firm. "If you want to test us, I'm ready." Zira's lips curled into a cold smile, her eyes narrowing. "I do not simply want to test you, soldier. I want to see if you truly understand what makes your race worth the respect you claim." Daniel raised an eyebrow. His curiosity piqued. He had been prepared for a physical trial, but Zira's words suggested something deeper. "What exactly do you mean?" he asked. The princess stood from her throne, her long robes flowing around her like a shadow. She moved toward Daniel with graceful, measured steps. As she walked, her expression never wavered. There was an unshakable confidence in her movements, as though she already knew the outcome of whatever challenge she was about to present. "You see," Zira said, her voice lowering as she circled around him, "my people are the strongest in the galaxy. We have the greatest minds, the most powerful warriors, the most advanced technology. We have conquered worlds, shaped empires, and bent entire civilizations to our will." She stopped in front of him, her eyes piercing into his. "And yet, in all of my time ruling this galaxy, I have never encountered a race like yours. Humans, you are fragile, unpredictable, and weak. But there is something about you, a strength I cannot quite grasp, a spark that refuses to die, no matter how many times you are tested." Daniel didn't flinch under her gaze. He had faced interrogation from his own superiors, endured long, grueling battles, and stood strong in the face of death. Zira's intimidation tactics weren't going to break him. The princess continued, her voice softer now, almost as if she were contemplating her own words. "I want to see if this spark, this strength, is real. If humans are truly worth the admiration they claim, you will face 3 trials. Each one will test a different part of your humanity. Each trial will push you to your limits. If you pass, you will prove that your species deserves the respect of the galaxy." Daniel's mind raced. 3 trials. He wasn't sure what they would be, but he could already feel the weight of the challenge. Zera wasn't offering a simple battle. She was setting a gauntlet, one that would test everything he stood for. "What kind of trials?" Daniel asked, keeping his voice steady. He had no idea what he was about to face, but he knew he couldn't show fear. Not now. Not in front of someone like Zera. The princess tilted her head slightly, a small, almost predatory smile curling on her lips. "The first will test your mind, the second will test your body, and the third will test your soul." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Mind, body, soul," he repeated, trying to make sense of her words. It was clear that this wasn't going to be an ordinary test. Zera's trials weren't just about fighting. They were about something deeper, something more personal. "You will understand soon enough," Zera said cryptically. "I expect you to succeed. But do not think for a moment that I will make this easy. My people do not respect weakness. If you fail, I will ensure that your people know just how unworthy you truly are." Her voice was sharp, and Daniel could hear the truth behind her words. Zera wasn't just testing him. She was testing all of humanity. Every failure he had, every mistake he made, would be used to judge his entire species. Daniel took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. "I won't fail. I'll prove that humanity is stronger than you think." The princess's expression flickered for just a moment. It was subtle, but Daniel caught it. There was a trace of something in her eyes, something that might have been doubt, or maybe even curiosity. For the first time, it seemed that Zera wasn't entirely sure of the outcome. She might be testing him. But in that moment, Daniel knew something important. This wasn't just a test for him. It was a test for her as well. Zera stepped back, her eyes still locked onto his. "Very well, Captain Hayes. We shall see if you are truly as strong as the legends claim. Prepare yourself. The first trial begins now." Without another word, she turned and signaled for the chamber doors to open. Alien guards stepped forward, their eyes cold and indifferent, leading Daniel toward the unknown. He didn't know what awaited him, but one thing was clear. He had no choice but to face it. He had to prove humanity's strength. The first trial, the mind game. Captain Daniel Hayes followed the alien guards through the winding corridors of the palace, his thoughts racing. The doors to the chamber had just closed behind him with a soft, final thud. He knew this was it, the first trial, his first test to prove humanity's worth. The weight of Princess Zera's challenge pressed heavily on him, but he wasn't about to back down. This wasn't just about surviving. It was about winning, proving that humanity had something no other species could match. They arrived at a door at the far end of the hall. It was plain compared to the rest of the palace, simple even, yet there was a strange energy about it. The guards stepped aside, and one of them gestured for Daniel to enter. "Inside," the guard said, his voice cold and emotionless. Daniel took a deep breath and walked into the room. It was smaller than the vast halls of the palace, but its simplicity made it feel more intense. The walls were made of smooth black stone, with no windows or decorations. In the center of the room stood a large transparent sphere. It hovered slightly above the floor, and inside the sphere, there were swirling lights and strange symbols that seemed to shift and change as if alive. This was no ordinary test. Daniel's instincts told him this was something far more complex, something designed to break him mentally. He squared his shoulders, preparing himself. A voice echoed from the walls, low and commanding. It was Princess Zera's voice. "Welcome to the first trial, Captain Hayes. This is the mind game. Your task is simple. Solve the puzzle before you, and you will pass this trial. Fail, and you will never see your people again." The sphere in front of Daniel suddenly glowed brighter, and the symbols inside it began to rearrange themselves, slowly at first, then faster and faster. They danced before his eyes, flashing in patterns that were both beautiful and confusing. As the symbols moved, they began to form words. They were not in any language Daniel had ever seen, but something inside him recognized the pattern. His mind raced. The air around him seemed to pulse with a strange energy, and the symbols inside the sphere seemed to hum with life, as though they were waiting for him to understand. He stared at them, trying to make sense of the ever-shifting shapes. For a moment, he felt a twinge of doubt. Was this even solvable? The symbols were too complex. The patterns were too random. What if he wasn't smart enough to crack this? What if he failed the first test? But then, something inside him snapped into focus. He remembered something his father had once told him. No matter how hard the challenge, you don't give up. Not ever. He took another step forward, eyes narrowing in concentration. This was a battle of the mind, not the body, and he would not be defeated by confusion or fear. He took a deep breath, letting his thoughts clear. He focused on the symbols once more, not trying to decipher them all at once, but instead looking for any sign, any clue that could help him. The patterns weren't random. They were organized, but in a way that didn't immediately make sense. Daniel studied them more carefully, his military training kicking in. He remembered the times he had to solve complex problems under pressure. Strategies, codes, messages hidden in plain sight. His mind worked through the puzzle systematically, breaking down the symbols into smaller, more manageable pieces. He saw it now. The symbols weren't just random shapes. They formed a code, a language hidden within their complexity. With each passing moment, Daniel's mind sharpened, and the fog of confusion began to lift. His eyes darted between the swirling symbols, trying to figure out the logic behind their movements. Slowly, he began to decode the pattern. It was like a map, an intricate web of connections that formed an image, a map of the galaxy, showing star systems and planets. The puzzle wasn't about translating words. It was about understanding how everything fit together. The map inside the sphere was showing a way to chart a path through the stars, leading to an unknown destination. But why? What was this leading to? Just as Daniel was about to make a breakthrough, the room began to shift. The walls seemed to close in, the air growing thicker, heavier. The puzzle's symbols started to move even faster, the lights growing more intense. Princess Zira's voice rang out again, this time louder and more demanding. "You are running out of time, Captain Hayes. Solve the puzzle now, or suffer the consequences." The pressure was building. Daniel's pulse quickened, his mind racing against the clock. He couldn't afford to make a mistake now. He had to complete the puzzle. His entire mission, humanity's future, depended on it. The map inside the sphere began to shift, the stars rearranging themselves. Daniel recognized the pattern. It was showing him the locations of the trials. The map was directing him to the next test. If he could follow the right path, he would be one step closer to proving humanity's strength. His fingers tightened into fists as he made the final connection. The symbols aligned, the puzzle clicked into place, and suddenly, the sphere's light blazed with a brilliant intensity. The walls of the room seemed to breathe, the pressure lifting in an instant. Daniel stepped back, his heart still pounding, but his face set with determination. He had done it. He had solved the first trial. The voice of Princess Zira echoed in his ears, but this time there was a trace of something else in her tone, a hint of surprise, perhaps even respect. "Well done, Captain Hayes. You have passed the first trial. But know this, there are more challenges ahead, and they will be even harder. Prove to me that you are worthy of the legends of your species." Daniel nodded, his resolve only strengthening. This was only the beginning, and he wouldn't stop until he had shown the galaxy just what humanity was capable of. The second trial, the test of strength. The air was thick with tension as Captain Daniel Hayes stood in the center of a vast arena, his muscles tense and his senses alert. The cold stone beneath his boots was a stark contrast to the fiery heat rising from the ground. Around him, high walls encircled the arena, and the crowd of alien spectators stood in silence, watching him closely. He could feel their eyes on him, assessing, judging. This was no ordinary test. This was the second trial, and it would test everything he had learned so far. Princess Xelari had been silent since the end of the first trial, but Daniel could sense her presence in the shadows, her gaze unwavering. She was watching, waiting, to see if humanity could survive this test of strength. The massive doors at the far end of the arena creaked open, and Daniel's heart skipped a beat. His breath came in short bursts as a shadow emerged from the darkness. It was no ordinary creature. This was something out of a nightmare. The beast was enormous, towering over Daniel by at least 3 times his height. Its body was covered in thick, armored scales, and its eyes glowed an eerie green, filled with an unnatural intelligence. The creature's claws scraped the stone as it lumbered forward, each step shaking the ground beneath Daniel's feet. The creature's mouth opened wide, revealing rows of sharp teeth, and it let out a deafening roar that echoed throughout the arena. Daniel's stomach twisted with a mix of fear and adrenaline, but he didn't move. He stood his ground, staring the beast down. This was the second trial, the test of strength. If he failed here, there would be no turning back. He had to fight, and he had to win. The crowd of alien spectators began to murmur, their voices rising in a low hum, as though they were betting on the outcome. Daniel felt a strange sense of isolation. His world, his race, everything he had ever known was now on the line. The weight of it pressed down on him, but he refused to buckle. With a loud, deafening roar, the beast charged. It moved faster than Daniel expected, its massive claws tearing into the ground as it lunged toward him. Without hesitation, Daniel rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's deadly swipe. The ground cracked beneath the beast's weight, and the air was filled with the stench of sulfur and sweat. Daniel's heart raced, but he focused on the task at hand. His training kicked in. The creature may have been bigger, stronger, and faster than him, but he had the one thing it didn't: strategy. He had faced impossible odds before, and he knew how to use his surroundings to his advantage. The beast roared again, but this time Daniel was ready. As the creature swung its massive claws at him, Daniel ducked low, using the momentum of the creature's attack to propel himself toward its underbelly. His fists clenched as he struck the beast with everything he had, aiming for its vulnerable points. The scales on its body were thick, but the soft spots beneath them were not invincible. His blow landed with a satisfying thud, causing the creature to stumble back. The crowd let out a collective gasp, and for a moment, Daniel felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could do this. But he knew it wasn't over yet. The creature was still standing, and it was angrier than ever. The beast recovered quickly, its eyes glowing brighter with fury. It let out a primal growl and lunged again, faster than before. This time, Daniel was ready. He darted to the side, narrowly avoiding the beast's attack. His body was already starting to ache from the effort, but he pushed the pain aside. He couldn't afford to think about it now. Not when he was fighting for humanity's future. The battle raged on, each attack from the beast becoming more vicious, each dodge from Daniel more desperate. The ground beneath them was torn to pieces as the creature swiped, clawed, and lunged. Daniel's movements were sharp and calculated, but even he knew he couldn't keep this up forever. He needed to end it. He needed to outsmart the creature, find a weakness, and exploit it. He spotted it, just for a split second. The beast's left side had a slight gap between its scales, a vulnerable spot where its flesh was softer. It was only a brief opening, but Daniel could see it clearly. His instincts screamed at him to act. With all the strength he had left, Daniel launched himself toward the creature, his fists swinging. The creature let out a terrifying roar as it swiped at him, but this time, Daniel was too quick. He slid under its massive body, narrowly avoiding the beast's claws, and in one smooth motion, he struck the gap in its scales with a powerful blow. The creature staggered back, its roar faltering as it collapsed to the ground with a mighty crash. The arena was silent for a moment, the air thick with tension. Then, as if on cue, the alien crowd erupted into applause, their voices rising in a deafening roar of approval. Daniel stood, breathing heavily, his body bruised and battered. His arms ached, his muscles burned, but he had done it. He had defeated the creature. He had passed the second trial. He turned slowly, his eyes meeting Princess Xera's from across the arena. She stood, unmoving, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Daniel wondered if she would say anything, if she would acknowledge his victory. But she remained silent, her gaze locked on him with something that might have been respect, or perhaps something more complex. Impressive, Xera's voice echoed in his mind, though her lips never moved. But do not think this means you have won. There is still one final trial, one that will test you in ways you cannot imagine. Daniel nodded, his resolve unshaken. He had proven himself in the test of strength, but the real battle was still ahead. He had faced the beast, but now he would face the final challenge, one that would test everything he had left. The third trial, the test of empathy. Captain Daniel Hayes stood at the entrance to another chamber, but this one felt different from the others. The air was calm, almost peaceful, yet there was an undeniable weight to it. He could feel it in his bones. The third trial would not be like the first two. No creature to fight, no puzzle to solve. This time, the trial was inside him. It would test his heart, his soul, his humanity. Princess Xera's voice echoed through the hall before he even stepped inside. "Welcome, Captain Hayes, to the third and final trial. This is the test of empathy. If you are truly worthy, you will understand what this means." Daniel took a deep breath and stepped into the room. Unlike the cold stone of the previous chambers, this room was warm and inviting. The walls were lined with soft, glowing lights, and the air smelled faintly of fresh flowers. It was almost like being back home on Earth, a comforting feeling, but one that made him even more uneasy. He wasn't supposed to feel comfort in the middle of a trial. He was here to prove something, and he couldn't let his guard down. The room was empty at first, save for a few strange, glowing plants in the corners. But then he heard soft sounds, almost like whispering. As he walked deeper into the room, he saw the source of the sounds. At first, they seemed to be shadows moving along the walls, but as he got closer, they took shape. He blinked, unsure of what he was seeing. In front of him, a small group of alien creatures appeared, nothing like the fearsome beast he had fought before. These beings were fragile, their bodies thin and delicate, with soft, translucent skin that shimmered in the light. They had large, round eyes filled with sadness, and their bodies seemed to move in slow, hesitant motions. They looked like they were in pain. Daniel froze. These creatures weren't warriors. They weren't soldiers or beasts. They were something else entirely. They were vulnerable, helpless. The voice of Princess Xera rang out again, this time colder than before. "These are the Vrexians. They are a dying species, one that my people have conquered and enslaved for centuries. They were once powerful, but now they are nothing. Their entire race has been reduced to this, weak, fragile, and powerless. Your task is simple, Captain Hayes. You must earn their trust. You must show them empathy, care, and kindness. If you can do that, you will pass this trial. If you cannot, you will fail, and humanity will be nothing more than a footnote in the history of the galaxy." Daniel felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. The Vrexians, he had heard of them. Their species had been destroyed by Xera's people, their planet consumed and turned into a desolate wasteland. He had been told that the Vrexians were nothing more than a lost cause, a race doomed to fade away. But standing in front of him, these creatures seemed to be more than that. They had eyes that looked into his soul, filled with a deep sorrow, and a longing for something he couldn't quite understand. He knelt down slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. One of the Vrexians cautiously approached him, its large eyes studying him with uncertainty. It tilted its head, its fragile body trembling slightly. Daniel reached out a hand, speaking softly, hoping his voice would reassure them. "It's okay. he said, his voice gentle. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help." The Phyrexian paused, its eyes never leaving his. Slowly, it stepped closer, and for a moment, Daniel thought it might pull away. But then, it reached out, its delicate fingers brushing against his. It was such a small, fragile touch. But it spoke volumes. This creature was afraid. Afraid of being abandoned, of being hurt again. It had known too much pain, too much loss. Daniel's heart ached as he held its hand, the weight of the creature's sadness pressing down on him. He knew this wasn't just about winning the trial. It wasn't about strength or survival. It was about understanding. It was about feeling what they felt, seeing the world through their eyes. The Phyrexian made a soft, almost inaudible noise, like a sigh. It seemed to relax, its body no longer trembling. Daniel knew that this was the moment. The test wasn't about grand gestures or words. It was about listening, about showing that even in a universe full of war and destruction, there was still room for compassion. He stood up carefully and gently led the Phyrexian to one of the glowing plants in the corner of the room. "Here," he said, kneeling down again, his voice calm. "These plants are safe. They won't hurt you." The Phyrexian watched as Daniel carefully touched the plant's soft petals, showing it that it was harmless. Slowly, the creature mimicked his actions, touching the plant with its trembling fingers. For a brief moment, Daniel saw a flicker of something in its eyes. Hope. Hope that it wasn't alone. Hope that it could trust him. Princess Xera's voice rang out again, but this time, it held an edge of something different, something unexpected. "You have passed the trial," she said, her tone softer than before. "You have shown them kindness, something that my people have long forgotten. Your humanity. It is stronger than I thought." Daniel didn't smile. He didn't need to. He wasn't here to win Princess Xera's approval. He was here to show these creatures, these beings, that they were worth something, that they mattered. For a brief moment, the walls of the arena, the weight of the trials, seemed to fade away. All that mattered now was the connection he had made with the Phyrexians, a simple act of kindness that spoke louder than any victory or conquest. The Phyrexian in front of him looked up at him with eyes full of gratitude. It wasn't just a test anymore. It was real. He had changed something here. And that, more than anything, was what made him proud to be human. The final test. The moral dilemma. The final trial was unlike anything Daniel Hayes had ever faced before. The quiet calm of the room shifted, the air growing heavier, almost suffocating, as he stepped through a set of massive ornate doors. Beyond them lay a space unlike the arena or the trials he had endured. It was a stark, barren wasteland, the ground cracked and dry as though it had been scorched by something far beyond natural heat. The horizon stretched endlessly, with no sign of life anywhere, just an oppressive silence that made the weight of the task ahead feel even heavier. Princess Xera stood before him, her eyes cold and unreadable. She had watched him pass the first two trials, and now her expression seemed to harden as she gazed down at him. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't just another test of physical or mental strength. It was something deeper, something that would challenge the very core of what it meant to be human. "The final trial begins now," Xera's voice rang out, sharp and clear. "This test will not be about your strength, your mind, or your ability to empathize. This test will be about your morals, your sense of right and wrong." Daniel stiffened. He had faced the other trials with determination, but now he understood that this was something far more complex. His every action, his every decision, would matter. It wasn't just about survival. It was about making the hardest choice he could imagine. Xera raised a hand, and a large holographic screen flickered to life in front of Daniel. On it appeared two images, one of a group of innocent civilians, huddled together in fear, and the other of a powerful ally, one of Xera's generals, held captive by the enemy. The civilians were no more than children, elderly and vulnerable civilians from a nearby planet, taken hostage by an invading force. The general was a leader in Zera's army, a ruthless and efficient soldier who had fought alongside her for years. Zera's voice was calm but cold. "You now have a choice to make, Captain Hayes. The civilians are being held at a secure facility not far from here. Their lives are in immediate danger. However, there is a catch." She gestured to the image of her general. "This man, General Vorn, has been captured by the same enemy force. He is being held in a separate facility, and he too is in immediate danger of execution. If you go to the civilian's location, General Vorn will surely be killed. If you go to save General Vorn, the civilians will perish." The words hit Daniel like a slap to the face. His mind raced, unable to fully grasp the enormity of the choice laid out before him. 2 options, 2 lives. But each choice came with consequences. If he chose the civilians, the general would die, and the galaxy would lose a powerful leader, one who might be key to stopping future conflicts. If he chose to save the general, the civilians, innocent people who had nothing to do with the war, would die without a chance for survival. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, trying to clear his thoughts. What is the right thing to do? He asked himself. The weight of the decision felt unbearable. His training told him that a soldier's duty was to protect and serve, but the situation wasn't so simple now. This wasn't about fighting an enemy. This was about choosing between 2 lives, 2 futures. He took a deep breath, opening his eyes again. Zera's gaze remained fixed on him, unwavering. There was no sympathy in her eyes, no hint that this trial was anything other than another test. She wanted to see what he would choose. She wanted to see if he would make the right choice. But what was the right choice? His mind drifted back to his own experiences. Countless battles, endless missions where he had to make decisions that affected lives. But this was different. The lives in question were innocent. They had no stake in this war. They weren't soldiers. They weren't warriors. They were just people, caught in the crossfire of a conflict they had no part in. On the other hand, General Vorn had spent years fighting for Zera's empire, leading troops, making decisions that had caused countless deaths. He was a soldier who had sworn an oath to serve, and now, that oath had led him to be trapped in a dangerous situation. His life had meaning, but did it mean more than the civilians? Daniel's thoughts swirled in a whirlwind of confusion. Every second felt like an eternity. He thought about the civilians, innocent children, their faces terrified, looking to him for help. And he thought about General Vorn, an ally of Princess Zera, but a man who had played his part in causing destruction. What would it mean to save him? Was that the right choice, simply because he was a soldier, because his life was tied to the higher order of war? Zera's voice cut through his thoughts, sharp and insistent. "Time is running out, Captain Hayes. Make your choice now. Who will you save? The civilians or the general?" For a moment, Daniel felt as if the weight of the universe rested on his shoulders. He had always thought that making the choice was simple. You follow orders, you complete your mission, and you move on. But here, in this trial, there was no clear right or wrong. There were only consequences, and he would have to live with them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Daniel made his decision. He stepped forward, his voice strong and unwavering. "I choose the civilians," he said, his words final. Zera's eyes flickered for a moment. Was it disappointment? Or perhaps something else? But she said nothing. The image of the civilians flickered on the screen, their faces now filled with hope as if they knew help was on the way. General Vorn's image disappeared, and a soft hum filled the room, signaling the end of the trial. The princess remained silent for a long time, her gaze cold. "You have chosen, Captain Hayes. You have chosen humanity over the interests of war. Your decision is unexpected, but it has shown me something. It has shown me that your species does not fight only for survival. You fight for something more. For life. For hope." Daniel nodded, his decision firm in his heart. It hadn't been easy, and the consequences were still unclear, but he knew he had made the right choice. A soldier's duty was not just to fight, it was to protect. And sometimes, the true test of strength wasn't in defeating an enemy, but in choosing to save those who needed it most. The princess concedes. The final trial was over, and Captain Daniel Hayes felt a strange mix of exhaustion and quiet triumph settle into his bones. The weight of the choice he had just made still pressed heavily on his mind, but there was no turning back now. He had done what he believed was right, and though the consequences were unknown, his conscience was clear. As he stood there, looking up at Princess Zira, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of both relief and unease. The princess was silent, her expression unreadable as she observed him with cold, calculating eyes. The air in the chamber felt heavy, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Daniel wasn't sure what to expect now. He had passed her trials, all of them, with every ounce of his will and strength. Yet he knew that Zira's pride would not allow her to concede easily. If she was going to acknowledge him and humanity, it wouldn't come without a fight. This wasn't about the trials anymore. It was about something deeper, something that could change the course of the galaxy. Zira took a slow step forward, her robes flowing like liquid shadows. Her face remained impassive, but there was something different about her now. The fierce confidence that had once radiated from her seemed subdued, almost tentative, as though she was no longer sure of the superiority she had once held over everything. "You have passed the trials, Captain Hayes," she said, her voice as cold and controlled as ever. "You have proven your strength, your intellect, your empathy, and your morals. But I will be the judge of whether humanity is truly worthy of respect." Her words echoed in the chamber, and for a brief moment, Daniel wondered if there would be a twist, a final test that would catch him off guard. But as he looked into Zira's eyes, he saw something there that he hadn't expected. Doubt. A flicker of something in her gaze that suggested she was no longer certain of the path she had set out on. The conviction that had once defined her seemed to be slipping away. Princess Zira's voice softened, just a touch. "I have tested you, Captain. I have made you face impossible choices, and I have watched your every move, your every decision. I have watched humanity through your eyes. I thought you would break under the pressure, that you would fail, as I have seen so many others fail." Daniel didn't respond right away. He simply stood there, waiting for her to continue. He had come too far to engage in a battle of words. His actions spoke louder than anything he could say. But Zira's next words hit him harder than he expected. "I was wrong. I have seen the strength of your kind, Captain Hayes. I have seen something in you, something that even I cannot deny." She paused, as though searching for the right words, something foreign to her. "Humanity is not the weak species I believed it to be." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The princess was admitting something he had never imagined hearing from her. She was acknowledging his success, acknowledging that humanity had proven itself worthy of something more. It wasn't just a victory in the trials, it was something far greater. "You have earned my respect," she said, her voice steady, but no longer carrying the sharp edge of superiority. "I thought I understood power, Captain. I thought I understood what it meant to rule. But you have shown me something different. Your people do not fight for power, not the way my people do. You fight for something deeper, for the protection of those who cannot defend themselves, for the preservation of life, no matter how fragile." Daniel felt a weight lift from his shoulders, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of humility. He wasn't just standing before a princess who had been forced to admit that humanity was capable of something she had not anticipated. He was standing before someone who had seen the truth of what it meant to be human. She had seen their capacity for kindness, for selflessness, and for standing up when everything seemed impossible. Zira stepped closer, her eyes searching his, as though she were trying to understand something she had never considered before. "Perhaps I have been wrong about your species all along. Perhaps the stories of humanity's resilience, your will to survive, your determination to protect what matters. These are not just stories after all." Her eyes softened, but only for a moment. "I thought we were the superior race, the pinnacle of evolution. But now I see that what makes your species strong is something more than physical power. It is your heart." The room was silent for a long moment. Daniel didn't know how to respond. What could he say to that? He had fought and endured to prove humanity's worth, but he had never expected this kind of recognition. It wasn't just about winning a fight. It was about earning the respect of someone who had once believed that no species could stand against hers. And now he had done that. Finally, Zira spoke again, her voice softer but firm. "I will extend an offer to you, Captain Hayes. To your species, I will not destroy humanity, as I once planned. I will not condemn you to be forgotten in the history books. Instead, I will offer an alliance between your people and mine. An alliance based on respect, on mutual understanding, and on the belief that together we can achieve something greater than we could ever do alone." Daniel felt his heart beat faster. This wasn't just a victory for him. It was a victory for humanity. An alliance with Zira's people could change everything. The wars, the battles, the bloodshed, it could all be stopped. A new future, one where humans and the powerful aliens could work side by side, was within reach. But even as he felt the weight of this new possibility, he knew that the journey ahead would not be without its challenges. An alliance was just the beginning. Zira extended her hand, and for the first time, Daniel saw the true meaning of her gesture. It wasn't just a formality. It was an offering, a real one, to build something new. He took her hand, and for the first time, Daniel truly understood what it meant to be human. It wasn't about the battles or the victories. It was about the choices we make when the world demands more from us than we think we have to give. And in that moment, Daniel Hayes knew that humanity had not only survived, it had triumphed.